All right, Alexander, let's do an update on what is going on in Ukraine. And let's start things off from the front lines and retreats, surrenders, negotiating surrenders, difficulties in the Avdiivka direction, but difficulties, I guess, everywhere for the Ukraine military. Chasov Yar, even Kharkov, we're seeing Russian advances, and we are getting admissions from Commander Syrskyi that Ukraine is having a difficult time fighting Russia, and the situation is very bad for the Ukraine military. So let's start things off with a summary of what is happening on the front lines, because things are deteriorating very fast.
They are indeed deteriorating very fast, and in fact, one gets the sense that things are getting worse at a faster and faster rate. The Russians seem to be advancing, as you said, in multiple directions. The big advances still seem to be taking place in the Avdiivka area. So we talked about some days ago about the fact that Ocheretino, this village on the hill through which the railway passes, that this has now fallen. It looks as if a number of other settlements to the east, Novokalim, Novo, and Keramik, are also falling rapidly under Russian control. Further to the west of Ocheretino, the Ukrainians were trying to create a new defense line through a number of other villages, Netailovo, Yasnobrodovka, and Umanske reports this morning that Netailovo, another village, is about to fall. As you correctly said, reports that Ukrainian troops are surrendering or negotiating their terms of surrender in various places, especially in another village called Berdichi, more a small town than a village. But apparently that has also now essentially fallen under Russian control after long months of battle. And a major battle going on in a rather bigger place called Krasnogorovka, which the Russians also appear to be close to capturing. Lastly, well, not lastly, but the Russians have now reactivated advances at a place called, in the area, in the northern sectors of their battlefronts. They seem to have captured, or in the process of capturing, another village called Kislovka. This is quite a big village close to the Oskol River. And as you rightly said, Chasov Yar, the Russians pushing hard there. And all of this at the same time as the Russians are launching missiles right across Ukraine, attacking positions right across Ukraine, doing enormous amount of damage in all parts of Ukraine with their missiles, going after energy complexes. They took out 3 more thermal power stations. They destroyed more railway connections. They go after ammunition dumps, all of those things. And Syrskyi, the new commander-in-chief, he has now publicly said that things on the front lines are bad, and he is apparently telling the Western powers in private that they're even worse than what he's prepared to say in public. So a general sense that the war is going very badly. And over the weekend, there were reports of an article that's appeared in a Swiss newspaper called Blick. And this has been interviewing various Ukrainian commanders. They say that Donbass, Donetsk and Lugansk are going to fall probably sometime around October, in which the Russians will capture the entirety of the Donbass, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Pakrovsk, all of these places that we're hearing. If Donbass falls, that opens the way, as I've discussed many times, for a major Russian advance to the Dnieper, at which point the war, it's not over if Ukraine decides to keep on fighting. But as we've discussed in many programs, the idea of creating a Ukraine west of the Dnieper really isn't a functional one. It isn't going to succeed, no matter what some Western governments and Western officials and Western commentators think. So overall, militarily, the situation accelerating and deteriorating, and the Ukrainians themselves acknowledging the fact.
Okay, so this brings us to the Kerch Bridge, to the Crimea Bridge, and various reports which claim that the Biden White House and Ukraine are going to be using ATACMS to target the Kerch Bridge, to destroy the Kerch Bridge. In your video update from yesterday, you mentioned that the timing of of the destruction of the Kerch Bridge would line up with with events unfolding in the first half of May if you really wanted to do the most damage to the Putin administration, given that you have Orthodox Easter, the most important holiday for Russian Orthodox, for all Orthodox believers. That is taking place the first couple of days of May. You have Putin's inauguration, which I believe is the 7th of May. And then, of course, you have the big event, which is the Victory Day Parade on May 9th, Dein Pobeda. So here we are with the destruction of the Kerch Bridge once again. We are talking about the destruction of the Kerch Bridge. Just a couple of more things, Alexander. The Lithuanian ambassador to Sweden, the Lithuanian ambassador to Sweden put out a tweet about the destruction of the Kerch Bridge, hinting at the destruction of the Kerch Bridge. I say that because an ambassador to Sweden, Lithuania's ambassador to Sweden, in my opinion, should not be talking about Ukraine or Russia. It's not his business. It's not his post. And of course, you have to go back to what I believe is very relevant, which is Nuland's statements about nice or nasty surprises that will be awaiting Russia. I believe that she was specifically talking about action being taken against the Kerch Bridge. You also have the German military officials who were caught on an audio leak talking about using Taurus missiles to take out the Kerch Bridge. All right, Alexander, the Kerch Bridge, the Crimea Bridge, the destruction of the bridge, the obsession about the destruction of this bridge, which is civilian infrastructure.
It is indeed, and it is absolutely an obsession. And of course, officially, formally, the United States, the Biden administration, has pretended for years that they oppose it, that they do not support attacks on the Kerch Bridge. If you remember, when the Ukrainians planted a bomb on the Kerch Bridge in October 2022, and by the way, for a long time they pretended it wasn't them, but they now basically admit that it was. Anyway, when they planted a bomb on the Kerch Bridge and did some damage, the US, the Biden administration, arranged for articles to appear in the media, the US media, saying that they disapproved of this attack. Like so many things that they disapprove of and say that they're against, it now turns out that they are actively lobbying for it to be done. And again, I can't help but think that this is all connected with the military situation. Ukraine is losing the war. It's becoming increasingly clear that the latest funding package isn't going to be anywhere near enough to help Ukraine. The situation with weapons production is terrible. The situation with air defense missiles is terrible. They can't reverse the situation on the battlefronts, and they know it. So they have to do something which they think is going to hurt Putin, damage Putin in the eyes of the Russian people, embarrass him at a time when, as I said, all these major holidays and events are taking place in Russia. And this is the attack on the Kerch Bridge. And we've had the big delivery of ATACMS missiles to Ukraine to enable that to be done. The Germans have balked so far at sending the Taurus missiles. We saw the German generals saying to each other that they would be used to attack the Kerch Bridge, but that it would need the Germans themselves to get involved. And there were some legal issues and concerns about that. And also that it would take an awful lot of Taurus missiles to do any real damage to the bridge. It would take about 20 apparently to destroy it, or to have any prospect of destroying it, because it is so enormous. But the Germans having their cold feet, but that doesn't stop us. We have to destroy the Kerch Bridge in order to show to Putin that, even if he's winning the war, we're going to hurt him where we think he will feel it. So he sent the ATACMS missiles, and we're going to attack the Kerch Bridge. Now, I say all of that. Of course, there's been no official confirmation from the United States that they want to see this happen. But in Ukraine, they've been saying that the Kerch Bridge will be destroyed in the first half of this year. Kirill Budanov, the intelligence chief, has said it several times. As you rightly said, the Lithuanian ambassador in Sweden has been talking about it. So we can take it as read that there is going to be an attempt and over the next few weeks, almost certainly in May, to destroy the Kerch Bridge. Now, whether that will succeed, I am not in a position to say. I would have thought that they will launch a major missile strike on the Kerch Bridge. Apparently, not an easy structure to destroy entirely. You would have to attack it in multiple places in a devastating way. And the Russians are saying that the Ukrainians have in fact launched around 15 to 20 ATACMS missiles already at Russian positions, and the Russians up to now have been able to shoot the great majority of them down. And of course, the Kerch Bridge is very, very well protected. But I'm not in a position to say that this attack is necessarily going to fail, because I don't know that it is. It might succeed. What I will say is it will change nothing in terms of the war. Ukraine cannot stop logistical supplies reaching Crimea now. Most of them go by land. There's a railway that the Russians have just built, which provides most of the logistics for the military there. Logistics also go to to Crimea by ship. This pointless, cruel attack on civilian infrastructure it is completely pointless in military terms. But of course, if you want to do something big, propaganda-wise, that you think is going to hurt and embarrass Putin, then you go after the Crimean Bridge. As I said, it has an obsessive quality. It is ultimately rational, but it looks like that's what they're going to try to do.
Can you think of any other reason to go after the Crimea Bridge? I mean, humiliate Putin, the Putin administration during the first half of May when they have all of these big events and celebrations going on. But is there any other reason to go after the bridge? Maybe they feel like this humiliation will lead to a regime change, or at least the beginnings of a regime change. I don't know. Or maybe they feel like this type of attack will lead to more support for Ukraine, more funding for Ukraine, because it will be seen as a significant victory, something like that. I mean, can you think of any other reason to go after the bridge? Because it just seems at this point in time, you're not stopping military supplies from entering into the front lines via the bridge. So you're just wasting missiles.
Yeah, exactly. All those reasons that you said, the hope that it will trigger, an upswell of opposition to Putin and will start events rolling towards a regime change, the fact that it will, give morale in Ukraine a new fillip, may make people feel they're more happy and encouraged and all that. The fact that it might encourage some people in the West to provide extra funding for Ukraine. All of that, I'm sure all of these things have been talked about and discussed, and there's assurances, with each other that this is going to make a huge difference and it's going to scare the Russians and alarm Putin and make them worry about the supply situation to Crimea and all of those things. But I don't think that these are the reasons why they are really attacking the Crimean Bridge. I think they're attacking the Crimean Bridge because they're very, very angry, and this is an emotional burst, if you like. They're angry because they realize that the war is being lost, and they're angry, and that's why they're going to do it, because this is how you, get your anger out of your system. If you follow these people closely, it's sometimes a mistake to overanalyze the reasons why they do what they do. And I think that's basically it. As I said, I'm sure, as I said, that if you go through all the paperwork, if you find the notes of all their discussions, which one day we will discover that, they're talking about all the scenarios that you outlined, but, they're just giving reasons to do what they want to do. Ultimately, it serves no purpose, but that's why but that's not stopping them from doing it. It basically, they're losing and they want to hit back and hit back hard in a way that they think will embarrass and upset the Russians and embarrass Putin specifically, and that's why they're going to do it.
Yeah, I do wonder what effect it would have if something like that did happen. What effect it would have on the Putin administration and Russia.
Well, now you mentioned my program yesterday, and I said that the Russians will respond, they will retaliate. And I said that perhaps one way they might retaliate is by doing something which they have not done up to this time, which is by attacking the Dnieper bridges, the bridges across the Dnieper. Now, I've had a very interesting email from someone after that program who's done some studies on this. And he has said that certainly the Russians do have the ability to destroy the Dnieper bridges. If they destroy the Dnieper bridges, the entire Ukrainian army east of the Dnieper is cut off and will eventually collapse. I mean, it receives all its supplies across the Dnieper. So it would be a devastating thing that the Russians might do. And I've speculated that perhaps one reason up to now why the Russians have not been doing it is because they wanted to use it as leverage in case an attack on the Kerch bridge does take place. If, of course, the bridge is attacked and destroyed, then that would free their hands and they might do it. Now, it's been pointed out to me that, in fact, the Russians had good reasons for not attacking the Dnieper bridges earlier, which is that they wanted the Ukrainian army to cross the Dnieper in the earlier stages of the war in order to be able to destroy it east of the river. If they hadn't done that, and most of the Ukrainian army had remained west of the river, then given that earlier in the war the Russians lacked the means to cross the Dnieper themselves in force, that would have enabled a much stronger build-up west of the Dnieper by the Ukrainians and the Western powers to take place. But I suspect that calculus no longer applies. That might be what the Russians do. But one way or the other, I will say one thing. I think those who expect that this is going to create a catastrophic crisis in Russia, that is going to lead to the collapse of Putin's government, that is going to do any of these things, I think that they're completely wrong. People in Russia will understand who is really behind the attack on the Kerch Bridge, that it is the United States. It will further confirm to Russians that the United States is hostile to them. Like every one of these attacks, it will harden and strengthen Russian support for the Russian government and make the Russians even more determined to see that this war is won and brought to a successful conclusion. And no one should expect otherwise. Both experience in this war and, by the way, experience from every other major war that has been fought shows that this is how people respond to attacks like this. But, as I said, I don't think it's going to change what the Biden administration wants to do. I suspect that driving this is the president himself. I think that he has a tremendous feelings of anger in him. We've discussed that in previous programs, and I think a lot of that anger is focused on the person of Vladimir Putin, and I think basically he wants to do whatever he possibly can to spite and injure and hurt Putin, um, especially at a time when it looks to him as if Putin is winning. It's the Captain Ahab, Moby Dick scenario, and we see it playing out yet again.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to go after the Kerch Bridge. I agree with you that is an obsession, but this first half of May, they're going to try something. I believe that with 100% certainty, and most likely, because we've been talking about the obsession with the Kerch Bridge, I would say, yeah, that is the number one target that they want to go after, the collective West as well as the Zelensky regime. But let's now talk about the financing of Project Ukraine. Zelensky, in his video update yesterday, I believe, on Sunday, he said that he is negotiating with the Biden White House for a 10-year financing plan. He didn't elaborate as to what this means, but 10 years of financial and military support, that is what he is trying to negotiate with the United States. And Reuters came out with an article this morning saying that the 61 billion is not enough, Alexander, and the way that they can keep Project Ukraine going for the long term, for the next 10 years, or at least according to Reuters, up until 2028, the way they can keep Project Ukraine fully financed up to 2028, and according to Reuters, Ukraine needs at a minimum $88 billion every year. The way they can keep this thing going is with a syndicated reparation loan. Now, we've talked about this in the past. This seems to be the plan in order to seize or steal the Russian frozen assets. 320 billion is the number that Reuters is coming out with, by the way, Alexander. 320 billion in Russian frozen assets, syndicated reparation loan. That is how they're going to get this money. A loan to Ukraine from the collective West. And this loan is going off against the reparations that Russia owes Ukraine. So if Russia refuses to pay these reparations, well, the money is loaned to Ukraine, and it's Russia's responsibility to pay this loan, because this is the reparation amount that Russia owes Ukraine. So that is the plan. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I mean, it's been floated before, and I'm sure it is the plan, and I'm sure the Biden administration is pushing it relentlessly. And I'm sure the British government, by the way, is pushing it relentlessly. And we've been talking about how the Biden administration wants to seize the Russian assets, and the reparations loan has been one of the instruments that has been talked about many times. It has been pointed out on numerous occasions by lots of people, including people who are very supportive of Ukraine, that this is illegal, that it can't be done legally speaking. The European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde herself, has spoken out against it. Euroclear, where most of the money is held, have spoken out against it. Lawyers around the world have said this is impossible, this is illegal, what you're trying to do is just theft. The very notion of reparations is something that you agree at the end of a war as part of a treaty which is agreed by the side which has lost. There is no situation like that existing today. But we're dealing with the Biden administration. They don't worry about legal niceties. They don't worry about the financial stabilities of Europe. As I said, there's an obsessive side to this. They're pushing relentlessly hard. We got reports in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago that the Germans are very, very unhappy about this idea. They don't want to go down this route. They're very worried that if the issue of reparations is brought up in this way, other countries around the world will start bringing up the issue of reparations against Germany for the events that happened in the Second World War. So, as always, the Germans putting up some resistance. Nobody really expects, I think, that resistance will hold. Most likely, we said it many times, this 300 billion in frozen assets will be seized in some form, and it's not going to make any difference. At least not. It's not going to make any difference in terms of the war, because yes, you've got all the money, but you're not producing weapons with it. This is the thing that again is difficult to get across. But already we're seeing that out of that $61 billion, $6 billion has now been allocated to produce weapons for Ukraine, apparently from the $13 billion that has been allocated for weapons for Ukraine. But those weapons have to be made because for the moment they don't exist. And making them is going to take years. And in practice and in fact, it doesn't, with $300 billion, all you've got is more money that you can't use in that way. But they're going to do it because getting hold of the money is now also a massive priority for them. They need to keep, their various funds running. They probably need to fund also the Ukrainian government in exile that they're probably already planning to create, or perhaps to fund Western Ukraine if they set up their defense lines on the Dnieper, which we've been talking about. All of that. They need to do all of those things. But the other thing they are, I think, working towards trying to do, and this is where the 10-year package comes in, is that they're trying to tie the hands of any future US president, including perhaps Donald Trump, if he is elected in November. They're creating a security agreement, which will presumably be ratified by the Senate, where the Senate has a majority and probably a 2/3 majority to ratify this thing. And they're going to put the funding aside by seizing the assets to keep the show on the road, regardless of what the new president does. So it's directed against the Russians, of course. It's intended to keep the funding running as well, but it's also intended to tie down Donald Trump in the event that he's elected in November. So that's what this is all about. Again, it's playing out an obsession. This is a disastrous idea, article after article saying how it will undermine the credibility of the Eurozone and the Western financial system. But Biden administration never wants to accept that kind of, that kind of advice. They're just going to go ahead and do it anyway. And eventually the Europeans will fall into line.
Yeah. This is what Reuters said, just to wrap up the video, Alexander. Ukraine would pledge its claim for reparations against Russia to a syndicate of its allies in return for a loan. If Moscow refused to pay the damages, the allies could use Russia's frozen assets to pay off the loan. I've never heard of this type of loan ever in my life.
Well, there isn't such a thing. I mean, it's
on any level, personal, business, government.
At any level, absolutely. I mean, this is as it anticipates a peace treaty after Ukraine has won that will cover the loan. Ukraine is losing; it's not winning.
Incredible stuff. Yeah, it highlights their desperation.
Yeah, but it also highlights their the obsessive quality of what they're doing. I mean, and that's, I think, again, it's a scheme. It's a way of getting round the law legally. I mean, this doesn't work, and it makes no sense. But as I said, we're dealing with the Biden administration, and that isn't going to stop them. This idea, by the way, has been around now for, well, many, many months. Just been shot down by the lawyers many, many times. But of course, as I said, that isn't going to stop them or prevent them doing that which they're doing now.
Just a final thought. I wonder how other countries see this. I wonder what they're thinking as they see all of this discussion about a reparation loan and seizing foreign assets go down. I wonder what China's thinking, what Saudi Arabia's thinking, what very wealthy investors are thinking.
Take your money out of the US and Europe and transfer it to Shanghai and Hong Kong and Singapore and places like that. That's what they're probably thinking. I mean, it's not as if these places don't exist anymore. And this is another thing which people perhaps in the West don't fully understand. But anyway, that's what they're going to be thinking. Of course, Dubai is another place where you could start putting money, and you buy gold as well. I mean, buy lots of gold, because that's, and not just, pledges for gold. You buy physical gold, which is something which the United States especially doesn't want people to do, because it doesn't want the price of physical gold to rise. There's vast literature on this topic. But, that is what people are going to do.
And governments.
And governments.
Like China.
Yeah. I like China.
Okay.
No, but they're already doing it. I mean, they're already doing it. And they're going to do it even more from this point going forward.
All right. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop. Pick up some limited edition merch. The link is in the description box down below. Take care.